All right, let's take a look at Columbus. Due to the fact that there are some Columbus people who feel that, due to where it is in the power rankings and the things I've said about Columbus, that I must not be watching Columbus. I must not be paying attention to what Columbus is doing this year because they've been really sort of awesome. And they really sort of haven't. Now, if you see an asterisk, that's a team that they've played this year that currently sits outside a playoff position. Interesting. So let's just, first off, look over their season because I'm talking about their entire season, not just right now. 3-2 win over Detroit in overtime. Then they lost versus Carolina 3-1. They beat Colorado 5-2. Colorado currently is outside a playoff spot. Florida they beat 5-4 in Florida, and then they lost 8-2 against Tampa. Coming out of that game at home, they played against Philly 6-3. They're 4-2 on the season, and that's where I started saying, "Wow, these guys are really inconsistent." They lost versus Chicago 4-1. They lost versus Arizona 4-1. And they're down to 4-4. They then went to St. Louis and won 7-4 before coming home, playing Buffalo, winning in overtime 5-4. They then lost to Detroit at home 5-3, which again caused me to say, "Yeah, I don't know what this team is right now," and I don't. I genuinely don't. I also know, and we'll go over the Metro, that the Metro is still wide open. San Jose, they beat in San Jose 4-1. They then lost in LA 4-1, which was the ultimate. I don't know. They beat San Jose, they lose in LA. That loss to LA, of course, John Stevens was fired right after, meaning that win over Columbus didn't really impress LA management. They then go into Anaheim and they lost in overtime 3-2. Anaheim is 30th on the power rankings board currently. They then beat Dallas at home. Dallas, I've said before, has struggles on the road. Those struggles have started showing up again. They win 4-1. They then go to Washington. They win 2-1. And then they lost last night in a shootout versus a New York Rangers team that you would think they would win against. Currently, the Washington Capitals are playing the Arizona Coyotes. It's 1-0 Arizona. The second's just started. Their goal differential is -2. Now, a lot of that can be looked at as that 8-2 loss, but I would point out they have a 7-4 and 6-3 win. So those lopsided victories kind of tend to even out. Their last 10, they've been 5-3-2, which means they've won 5 of their last 10. They're wildly inconsistent. Versus current playoff teams, they're 4-1. That's very impressive. The only loss they have against a current playoff team is Tampa. But against non-playoff teams, they've won 5 out of 12. So against teams that they should be able to beat, teams that are below them in the standings, they've won 5 out of 12. At home, they're 4-4-1, a 500 record. They need to improve that, and I think they'd admit it. On the road, they're 5-2-1. Very good road record. They want to get their home record to where their road record is. Bobrovsky currently has a .909 save percentage. It has come up from where it was. Admittedly, it was a very low percentage, and it was part of the reason they were struggling. Panarin currently has 18 points, and they've played 17 games. So they're getting a decent season out of Panarin. His scoring's kind of fallen off from where it was early in the season. But again, this is an inconsistency, and this is where the overtime loss, counting as a point on the schedule or on the record, makes it look better than what it is. This is why the NHL has those overtime losses there. Shootout loss instead of a tie, that kind of thing. So that gives a win to the New York Rangers that otherwise would have been a point as a tie up until, not the last lockout, but the one before. They are currently 1 point ahead of Philadelphia. Are we going to argue that Philadelphia has not been inconsistent? No. They're 2 points ahead of the New York Rangers. The New York Islanders. They've played one more game than the New York Islanders. If the Islanders win that game in hand, if they have the same number of wins, right now, Columbus would have the advantage on them because they have one more regulation or overtime win than the New York Islanders. New York Rangers, they're 2 points ahead of the New York Rangers now. 2. That's it. 2. They are 3 points ahead of the Pittsburgh Penguins. They've played 2 extra games. They're 3 points ahead of the Capitals. They've played 2 extra games. As I said, the Capitals are playing one of those games right now. They are 3 points ahead of the Carolina Hurricanes, and they've played the same number of games. You guys can see where I'm going with this, right? You have 3 points separating 1st and 7th in the division. If you're looking at your team right now and you're saying, wow, they're 1st. This is great. Awesome. Good. That's great. Fine. But you have to realize they're 3 points away from being 7th. The Metro Division right now is wide open. The only team not in the race is New Jersey, who are 7 points back. And the New Jersey Devils have been abysmal since that 4-game winning streak. Absolutely baffling me as to how that happens. Currently, Columbus is 2-1-1 versus the Metro Division. Of course, that shootout loss to New York Rangers last night is the second one on that number. They're 3-2 versus the Atlantic, 1-2-1 versus the Pacific. You know, the Pacific Division, the one that everybody says is really weak. They've won 1 out of 4 games there. They're 3-1 against the Central, the division that everybody thinks is strong. However, the only Central Division team they've played that's in a playoff spot is Dallas, and Dallas, it's precarious. Because on the road, they're not usually very good. And they weren't very good in that game against Columbus. All I've been saying about Columbus lately is they're inconsistent. And it's frustrating to me as somebody who wants to see them win a round. I don't want that to be a conversation again next year. I don't want to see them fall out of the playoffs. I'd rather not see John Tortorella fired because Tortorella is my favorite coach because he always says something that's quote-worthy. It baffles me. Baffles me how anybody could look at this record and say, but they've been really, really, really good. Or, no, you can't criticize them and say they're inconsistent because they have won 5 out of 12 against teams that are below them in the standings. And they've won 4 out of 5 against teams that are currently qualified for playoff spots. I don't make statements on this channel to incite fans of one team. I don't have a bias for or against. You look at my power rankings, Montreal's in 9th. I have given them an A for their first quarter of the season. I don't cheer for Montreal. I don't. Montreal fans will chime in on that. And I don't cheer against Columbus. I wanted Columbus to knock off Washington last year. I really did. I thought they had an excellent chance. I wanted that monkey off the back of the Columbus Blue Jackets after about 20 years of them not winning a round. I try to call it as brutally honest as I see it when I do reviews and previews, and I watch every single game. And it's hard sometimes. Some days I would love to just not watch hockey. Just go do something else. I watch hockey every single day. I've watched hockey every single day since October 3rd for you guys. Minus the one day that they had no hockey that Friday, and we tried to cram in as many movies and television shows as we could that day. And I'm very lucky to have a family that understands that I have to watch all the hockey games because they don't get to watch TV either during the evenings. I use the one down here because this is where I've got my set. That's part of the reason why when we move, that's going to change. There's going to be a change in how all this is done. But I cannot look at this record for the Columbus Blue Jackets and say, but they're playing really well. Because here's the thing. They beat Dallas, they beat Washington, fine. But that was coming off of losing to LA and Anaheim. I can't look at those wins against Dallas and Washington and not look at losses against LA and Anaheim. LA's won 5 games out of 16, and one of them was over the Columbus Blue Jackets. I can't look at that and say there's a really good, consistent, cohesive unit, especially looking at last night against the Rangers, the momentum shifts and everything. It's hard to look at them right now. They are now 2 points ahead of the Rangers with that shootout loss and say, well, they're 2 points ahead of the Rangers, but I'm going to give them an amount of praise that I'm not going to give somebody else who's only 2 or 3 points behind them and maybe has played less games. So that's my cause for concern with Columbus. And you can point to Seth Jones being out to start the season, but the record was 4-2 to start the season. So when Seth Jones was out, they still had a really pretty solid record through those first 6 games. And since he came back, the record hasn't got a whole lot better. So, there's a lot of concerns I have with Columbus, and this is your biggest concern. Your starting goalie and your number 1 point producer, there's no guarantee they want to stick around. They may want out. Panarin is seen as kind of a wild card. What if he says at the deadline, I really don't want to be here, and he wants to get traded before the deadline? What if his play starts to decay during the season because he really doesn't want to play in Columbus? We've seen it happen before where a guy plays to get traded. I remember Ed Belfour, after getting traded to San Jose, he really didn't want to play there. He played terribly. Absolutely awfully. And then the next year in Dallas, he was fine. He was back to being himself because he wanted to be in Dallas. So these things happen. All right, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.